Hi folks, thanks for watching our Engage People videocast. Our purpose is to align business with talent. I guess we're very lucky actually to work with a range of businesses which range from small companies, small Irish companies, and often to major multinationals. And when I speak sometimes to smaller companies, they feel it can be harder to attract the best people based on their size. The reality is actually, in my experience, that while some people do prefer work with multinationals, lots of people actually much prefer smaller businesses. They feel maybe their jobs might be a little bit broader. They might be able to have more of an impact, in how the business is run, and I guess in the success of the business. So in order to promote our business to the right audience, we would believe that employer branding is important. And to that end, I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, Gerard Tannam. So Gerard's the owner and strategic planner with Islandbridge Brand Development. They build brand relationships between owners, teams, customers. So for organizations such as AIB Private Banking, Savvi Credit Union, Lisney, Gannon homes, and acquired Brain Injury Ireland. You might recognize Gerard's voice, actually. He spent a number of years on the Bobby Kerr show on News Talk on Saturday morning, where it was always very interesting discussing Irish brands and how they're presenting themselves. So we discuss a little bit about branding and then a lot about how companies are promoting themselves to their target audience. I hope you enjoyed today's session. So Gerard, you're very welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. We're obviously coming towards the end, well, hopefully towards the end of the COVID-19 pandemic now in March 2021. So, and I guess the core of today's conversation, I've always been, and you and I have known each other a number of years, I've always found your approach to branding to be very, very interesting, and there's plenty of your philosophies and advice that I've taken on board in relation to engage people. But when I look at a number of our clients, so we're very lucky. We work with multinationals. We also work with smaller Irish companies, and there can be a perception sometimes that maybe smaller companies might find it harder to attract, people than maybe the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, the Googles might. But the reality is that individuals have their own preferences, and some people actually much prefer working with sort of small to medium sized companies and playing a really big role. I guess in relation to branding in the first place, I mean, I've always found your reference to the bullseye customer very helpful. Do you want to tell me a little maybe about why you think it's important for a company to have a clear sense of their preferred customer, and then we could talk maybe a little bit about how that's relevant then to their most desirable individual or employee or candidate to join the business?
Yeah, I mean, what I found over the years, the kind of the bullseye customer kind of crystallized for me over quite a long time, I think, kind of looking back. Kind of when we set up in 2004, we were working with kind of clients who kind of often came to us and asked us to help them put in place a kind of a strategic framework for their brand that would enable them to attract more customers. And in having kind of conversations with our clients, we kind of quickly realized they weren't just looking for more customers, they were looking for better customers. And in fact, when you drill down a bit further, they were looking for their best customers. So we kind of started to ask the question, you're putting in place now an infrastructure to attract people. Kind of who do you want to attract? And we found it very useful when our clients already had a clear picture in their minds of what a best customer looked like. And when we kind of took that to its logical conclusion, we identified what we now describe as the bullseye customer. And I mean, I think our use of the term bullseye customer is fairly distinctive, but I'm often surprised that it kind of hasn't been used more widely, because the purpose of a bullseye, as you know, on a target is to help you to aim better, to focus you at the kind of heart of the target or the market, in the case of branding. And if you're really, really clear about kind of who stands at the heart of your market, you're much more likely to hit the overall target. In other words, you may not hit the ideal, but you'll come pretty close to it in terms of how you communicate, who you communicate to, and most importantly, who you attract in. So, for many of our clients, the question, who do you want to attract in? Do you want to attract in kind of more of the mix of customers you have, some good, some great, some not so good? Or do you want to attract in, from now on, do you want to attract in only the best customers? And of course, when you ask it in that way, people are often surprised. And when you look at what people do, we often send out messages which are maybe not quite as broad as anyone will do, but there's an element of generalization which isn't helpful to anybody. It's not helpful to the business, because the business is kind of scanning the horizon, hopefully, looking for customers. And it's not helpful for the customer or the person that you're looking to attract in, because they're hearing messages from, many competing businesses, which all sound like the same message. They're all pretty much blah, blah, blah. So it makes life difficult for both sides. And we've always seen brand as being concerned with the relationship between the person buying and the person selling. So we ask the question then, who's the best customer for my business? And just as the customer is asking the question, who's the best supplier or provider or employer, in your case, for me. So it's helpful for both sides, if you have a clear idea of what you're looking for, you're much more likely to find it. And in kind of idealizing it in some way, people are often concerned that, they're being too kind of perfectionist. But we always say the purpose of the bullseye isn't that you hit it. The purpose is that it sharpens your focus. And that's why the perfect client, the ideal client, the bullseye client, our customer, is so important for a business.
Yeah, no, totally. And just as you're speaking, I mean, I can really empathize both in terms of from our client's perspective, as well as recruiters when we're working on positions. Where you're never looking for more applicants, really, because it's much more about quality than quantity, and it's having a clear idea of the type of person. And obviously there's a number of different sort of factors of, you're looking for a variety of people, whether it be from an ethnic mix, from a gender perspective, but it's a lot to do then with the skill side, and really focusing in on that. And I mean, how do you see it as being most relevant from an employment perspective, from an employer perspective, maybe applying that sort of bullseye methodology or sort of mindset?
Well, I think what it does, most importantly, kind of first of all, is that it focuses your attention on what matters to you as an employer. In other words, first of all, what matters on your side of the shop counter, but also what's likely to matter for your customer. So the exercise of asking yourself, what is it that I need? What is it I want? What is it I value in a potential employee, for example? And what is it that I need them to be willing to do? And what is it that I need them to be able to do? And that's, in a nutshell, how we define a best customer. Is we say they must need, want, and value what it is you have to offer. They have to be willing to engage with you and able to pay for or to make the commitment, whatever that commitment is, to make the exchange. So when you take that thinking to an employer, for example, what it obliges you to do is be absolutely explicit what is important for you in reaching an agreement, making a deal. Because if you look back to the kind of very origins of any transaction, and employment is a transaction. It's you're asking somebody to give something to you, and you're going to give them something in return. And if you look back to the origins, it's really important that you're clear about what you need to see on the table for it to be a good deal. And you also need to be clear about what your customer, or in this case, the would-be employee, what they need to see on the table for it to be a good deal. So the exercise of identifying what a perfect employee looks like is not as self-serving as it sounds. It serves you, but it also serves the employee, because the clearer you are about what a good employee, a good team member looks like, the clearer the would-be team member is about how they might fit. And it also gets your assumptions out on the table. One of the exercises that we do very early on in a business is we ask the people concerned with selling to profile for us what a great customer looks like, ideally from their existing customers. So we ask them each of them to pick out a customer that's as close to the ideal in their current mix as they have. And so you could do the same, for example, if you have a team of employees, you could ask yourself, who's the one that's the closest fit, the best fit for us as an organization? And And what's amazing, and I shouldn't be amazed after all these years, is that if I ask 10 salespeople, I'll get 10 answers. Now, the business cannot have, 10 such different. You might argue that maybe if there's one or two customers come up as close to the ideal, but there certainly aren't 10. So it sets in play a very interesting exercise in which we ask the question, well, but what does constitute a great customer? So let's define a great customer first. So when you ask that question in an employment context, you say, well, what actually constitutes a great employee? Now you're on the road, first of all, to getting agreement amongst yourselves as employers about what that looks like, and also, what sort of mix of employees will make up, because we know that, if you're talking in employment terms, you don't want to have 100 employees all exactly the same. But you do want 100 employees very close to your ideal. And then recognizing that there'll be different strengths, different styles, different approaches, etc. But you want to make sure, at least, is that they can all relate to the best employee, the perfect, the notional one, because of course there isn't an actual best employee. There's just simply the notion of it,
And I think it's really interesting. So we focus on our purpose as a business is about alignment, and it's understanding, and we're talking a little bit about the employer value proposition today, and getting, becoming clear on that, becoming clear on what the most desirable person to join the business might look like. And by the sounds of it, a lot of it's going to be around their attitude, as much as their skills. But it's a two-way street, and the real win-win is that the individual who's joining the business understands their own value to the business and understands that that's a potentially a good place for them to work, and in harmony, it works out very, very well. Most people are motivated by, there's definitely financial aspects, but it's usually to do with challenges, working with people, who value their involvement. And there's lots of other sort of smaller pieces. If you were looking about how a company can distinguish themselves in a busy market, and I know that there's a lot of sayings around the war for talent, or which sounds it's very sort of tribal. But what's your view maybe about how a business can distinguish themselves? To maybe that they're clear about their sort of value proposition to a potential employee?
Well, one of the most unhelpful terms I've ever come across is one that's very popular with people in my line of work, which is the USP, the unique selling proposition. And you say, I don't believe unique matters at all, because the fact is we're all unique. So you throw it out the window immediately. There's no such thing as a unique selling proposition. What you might have is a distinctive selling proposition, but in point of fact, people will buy from you and they'll work for you if the relationship that you're proposing is attractive to them. And if you think of the way in which we make other choices around relationships, whether it's a personal relationship, who we choose to marry, who we choose to be friends with, who we choose to play a sport with, or whatever it might be, we don't sit down and kind of work out a kind of a checklist of qualities and characteristics, etc., that satisfy us that they're the only person in the world who could possibly fulfill that particular role for us. So when we talk about that war for talent, or the kind of needs to stand out from competitors, it's much more important to determine what is the nature of the relationship that you're proposing to your employee, and that relationship has to have some connection to the relationship that you're proposing with your customers, because there's as Princess Diana says, there's three people in the relationship, in the sense, in that relationship, insofar as you're relying on the people you hire into your business to deliver on your relationship with your customers. So it's vitally important, first of all, that an employer knows exactly what type of relationship they propose to their customers and their customers expect. And then secondly, what type of relationship they propose for their employees, and what relationship their employees will have with both the company and their customers as a result. So people are much more likely to be attracted into an organization where they feel that the relationships they're going to have, and I'm not talking about heavy kind of relationships. I mean, just simply the connections, the interactions, the exchanges that they're going to be having on a daily basis are going to be rewarding for them, and rewarding in every sense. And that the relationships they're going to be supporting in the marketplace are going to be rewarding. And we all have examples of people working for companies where neither the relationship with the customer or the relationship with the employer is satisfactory. So what you have is people just going through the motions. So I believe that what all companies must do is make absolutely explicit and bring to life the nature of the relationship they enjoy with their customers, the role they play in their customers' lives. And then typically what you'll find is that if that's an attractive enough proposition, you have people queuing up to be part of that relationship, of delivering that in. And it's the same reason people decide to support a particular team, a sports team or whatever. They buy into the relationships that they see at play in front of them. So we set great store on defining that relationship and understanding why it's so attractive to the customer. And then you can kind of turn it sideways and then say, why is it now attractive to a would-be employee? And one of the most important things we do, and one of the most effective things we do at an early point in our process, we survey our clients' customers, and then we feed that feedback back to their team. And you wouldn't believe the impact that has on the team, because sometimes for the first time they're getting an insight into the relationship that they're delivering every day to the customer. But because many of the team may not be meeting customers every day, they have no sense of how important they are in their customers' lives. So we all want to believe that we're significant. We all want to believe that what we do is important. So one of the most important things we can do is talk about the importance of our relationships with our customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that sort of authentic messaging then to a potential employee. So say starting from scratch, and it might be a medium-sized Irish company, and you work with lots of companies in the manufacturing distribution space. And if we say, for example, that these companies are competing for, say, engineers, highly qualified engineers in big demand, to start out with a sort of an authentic message to a potential, someone who's interested in joining the company, is it a case of getting your story straight internally and everyone sitting around at the leadership table and agreeing what we're going to say? Or do you believe it runs deeper than that, and maybe speaking with people throughout the organization? How would you go about if there was a sort of a simple sort of couple of steps to take?
Yeah, well, before you start talking about forming any relationship, you need to ask yourself kind of what's happening on both sides of the gap. What's or the counter or the table, whatever it is. So the first thing we will do, and we would recommend anybody do it, is that you effectively survey your side of the gap that needs to be bridged. And in practical terms, that's exactly what you described there a moment ago, is that you talk to as many people in the business as you can. And you can do that internally. You don't need to get somebody from outside to do it. The advantage, of course, of getting somebody externally is that they're more inclined to hear things more frankly very often than you might if your boss asks you a question about what it is that you're looking for in the organization. But it's really about connecting the work that people do to I suppose the overall purpose of the organization. So the exercise really has to kind of start at the beginning, is to ask yourself, what contribution are you making? And I don't mean that in a high-minded way. As I think it was Ray Kroc, the McDonald's man, said, if you're selling hamburgers, you got to see the beauty in a hamburger, and you got to sell the beauty in a hamburger. So there's no point in selling hamburgers unless you believe that they're a thing of beauty, right? And they're important in their own right for your customer. So the most important thing you need to do is to get an understanding of why is what you do important. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. Sometimes the most important thing for somebody is that they have a nice ice cream. Sometimes the most important thing is that the light that's not working in your living room gets fixed. And we need to have tremendous respect for our customers. So it's really important that as an organization, that the first thing you do is you determine what is it we do for our customers and why is that important to them.
Yeah.
And then you build everything around that importance. And then you get people's understanding of where they fit in delivering that. And look, we've all heard the cliched story of the guy sweeping the floor at Cape Canaveral, and the president asking, what is it you do? And he says, I help send people to the moon. And whether or not it ever happened, we see what's being said is that if the floor doesn't get swept, then at some point people don't get to make it to the moon, because otherwise it's not an important function. Why do you have somebody do it? So it's about ensuring that everybody in the organization has a clear understanding of why what they do is important. And then, of course, that translates into when you write up your job profile, when you write up your ad or whatever it might be, that you make it very, very clear to the would-be applicant where they fit into that relationship with the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think, like, and you've obviously partnered with a good range of businesses, organizations, so we mentioned AIB Private Banking as being one, which is obviously a major organization, and then maybe there might be smaller organizations or a medium-sized company in the same sector, Savvi Credit Union. When you meet companies of various shapes and sizes, is there anything in particular that sort of strikes you about the people? Do you find in larger companies that maybe, that because there can be a perception, I'm not talking specifically about any companies mentioned, that there's sometimes maybe more of a transient type approach where people are sort of passing through, whereas maybe in a smaller company, there's a bit more personality, or they're a bit more of their personality maybe associated with the brand. I'm just wondering, from your own perspective, is that something that sort of strikes you when you meet companies, or is it totally down to the individual?
I think it's down to the individual. You see, I think all of our notion of employment is changing, and I'm sure that's been your experience. I'm just on the outside, kind of looking in. But in the sense that at a very, very simple level, we've moved from the kind of the model of the job for life to the to the model that's much more about kind of first of all, a series of lives, so never mind one life, but also, parts of your life or phases in your life or whatever it might be. So I think a lot of the taboo has gone out of the idea that I may come and want to work, I may want to come and work for you for the next 2 years, and then I may want to go and work for somebody else. And it isn't like we're breaking up a marriage here. We're simply acknowledging that at a certain time in our respective lives, our respective your company and my career, our needs are matching at that point, and then there may come a point in 2, 3, 4 years. So as long as we're honest with each other about that, I think that's the most important thing. So back to your question then, in terms of do I notice that how is it in smaller companies versus bigger companies? Look, I think smaller companies by their nature tend to take things more personally. So I think perhaps bigger companies have been more adept at kind of adapting to that, kind of portfolio approach to career, to people moving on, and to people kind of moving in and out of corporate, into SME, into startup, and recognizing that they're all important companies. That a company at startup is just as important as a global a giant,
no, absolutely, no, it makes sense. And I think you're right, and there's such an, obviously we see within certain sectors at the moment that there's so many changes coming up in relation to sort of skills, and you probably see, we spoke about engineers, it's the skill set that people acquire now can often be applied to lots of different sectors, as well as maybe moving to a competitor or staying in a sort of similar space. Anything else, Gerard? I mean, Gerard, it's been extremely interesting, I have to say. I always enjoy your view on this. Anything else to add, or anything we've missed out that you think is it's worth mentioning? I mean, there'd be quite a few people maybe in the human resources profession who'd be watching this. There'd be maybe finance directors we all want to hire the best people. I mean, anything else you think you'd like to add?
Well, no, I mean, apart from the fact that I'm often surprised at how kind of brand is used so two-dimensionally in organizations. And I think it's in part because it's seen as being much more concerned with kind of reputation or promise or proposition rather than about relationships. And and particularly in the HR space and in the recruitment space, where your own business is engaged people. So it's all about people, right? So we say it's all about people, and then we talk about our brand and our business, as though it's actually not about people at all, as though it's about some sort of messaging constructs or communication frameworks or principles. And it's really not about any of those things. It's primarily about relationships. So I would encourage kind of HR people and kind of everybody in an organization to get that understanding of the relationship they have with their customer, which is the core to any business, is the quality of the relationship that you enjoy with your customers, and to use that as your blueprint, as your reference for everything you do. And particularly then when it comes to attracting and keeping the best people, is if you're clear about what that looks like in relationship terms, well, then you're far more likely to speak the language that your would-be employee or prospective employee is speaking, and also to understand what they're looking for in terms of the relationship, rather than in terms of sort of a salary expectations and kind of ranked criteria. Now, ranked criteria are only of certain value. What's much more important is, how do I feel about working for you? What's going to excite me about working for you? And that's going to come down to the nature of the relationship that we're looking for.
Brilliant. So, Gerard, thank you very much. Extremely helpful, and I always enjoy our conversations. Where can people find you, Gerard, if they're keen to connect or keen to chat further?
Well, they can find out all about us at islandbridge.com. You get all the contact information there, and look, you can always drop you an email. We're a small business, so I'm always happy to talk to people and to help out if I can. And if I can't help, I'll always point people in the right direction of the person who can.
Great. Gerard, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Paul.